Great to see you all today. We're going to be going over resolutions writing, but just to introduce ourselves before we get going here. So my name's Jack Hill. For those who haven't met me yet, or I haven't gotten the chance to interact with yet, I have interacted with most of you in here though, so that's very happy. I'm very happy about that. But I'm the Region 1 Regional Affairs Director, and I'm also the chair of the SSCCC's Internal Committee. Bingo. Yeah. And with me today is Paul Medina. He's also a member of the Resolutions Committee. And joining us shortly will be Victor Hernandez. He's the lad from Region 9, and he's also a member of our committee. But without any further ado, we will. Oh, and I can't leave out Roy on the Zoom too. He is online, and he's also a member of our Resolutions Committee. He's the Legislative Affairs Director from Region 8. But with that, let's get started. Bingo. So what is a resolution? You guys are probably all thinking that. You probably hear that term a lot just in different like internal organizations. But a resolution is essentially just a written motion. It's made up of two parts: the rationale, which comprise the whereas statements, and the action, which are the resolve statements. But essentially, I like to think of resolutions as kind of like mock legislation, right? And thinking of the SSCCC as a legislative body, right? We meet once a year to vote on resolutions, or not resolutions, at our General Assembly. And essentially, what a resolution is asking is it asking for the SSCCC to either take a stance on a particular bill or issue, or make a certain issue a legislative priority that we will then advocate for in the California State Legislature. So moving on. And obviously, so what do General Assembly resolutions do? They recommend or direct the SSCCC to do something, i.e. take a position, conduct research or investigate an issue, conduct a breakout session, work with another group or individual, etc. But it also provides direction for the SSCCC Council and its committees. That's kind of like an old term. This is an old PowerPoint, so council, that's a little outdated term, but it just SSCCC. And it also urges or recommends policy or actions to local student senates or other groups or individuals outside of the SSCCC. So yeah, I could give like a little example for that last bullet point. So current issue that's facing all of our campuses right now, a vaccine mandate. Obviously, the time to take a stance has already come. The SSCCC has taken a stance on a vaccine mandate, but if we hadn't yet, some student from any college in the California Community College system could write a resolution saying, whereas vaccines, et cetera, resolved, the SSCCC should either support or oppose vaccine mandates on local college campuses. But with that, I'll let Paul take over the next couple of slides to talk about really the in-depth parts of a resolution. So Paul.
Thank you, Rad1. Once again, Paul Medina, Regional Affairs Director for Region 7. So part 1, the background. What is the background? Provide a brief statement to provide background information. Now, you gotta strengthen the understanding or importance of what the resolution's about. Written in separate paragraphs, and just so you know, we're gonna provide an example right after this. So comes before the word resolved. Only have 4 per resolution, 4 whereas, because if you start having too many, it just loses that clear and concise element to it. Now, too much information can be distracting. Now, each whereas ends with a semicolon. So on to the next slide. Here's an example. It's funny, but it's a short and sweet, clear and concise resolution. Whereas dogs need food to survive. Whereas dogs cannot live without food. Whereas the dog's bodily functions will shut down without nourishment. And whereas dogs will die without food. Now, part 2, the action, indicates the action to be taken by the SSCCC. It's written in separate paragraphs, comes after the whereas. There's only 4 per resolution, and too much information can be distracting. Example, why feed your dog? Resolved, that the SSCCC recommend that you feed your dog daily if you want it to live. Now that was a good, clear and concise resolution. Now let's provide an example of a not too good, clear and concise resolution, and that is this one. Bad example, why keep a goldfish in water? Whereas a goldfish cannot survive in water. Whereas a goldfish, if kept in water, drowns. Whereas a goldfish needs to be babysit or else. Whereas a goldfish will turn silver. Do you see where they're well, they're not really facts, but they're really illogical words, obviously written. And notice there's four whereas, but then afterwards it continues. Whereas a goldfish in water for a prolonged period of time will start flying, and whereas I hope this resolution gets approved at the General Assembly. Fingers crossed. So let it be resolved. A goldfish shouldn't be kept in water, or else it turns silver, starts flying around, and drowns if you don't babysit it. So, as you can see, two different examples. One short and sweet to the point, it's clear and concise. The other one, it's a different story.
Absolutely.
Next to you. Thank you.
Yeah. One thing I want to emphasize with this great bad resolution topic that Paul came up is, it may be succinct in everything, like that's what we're looking for, but ultimately you have to be somewhat logical, right? Like, obviously that's an extreme example, but also in terms of legislation, if you're taking like illogical stances that just don't comport with what the bill is actually saying, then the delegates at GA are going to recognize that. So it's super crucial that you come, and that's also just a great example of providing citations and research to back up your resolution. So yeah, but let's move on to resolutions about legislation. So resolutions that deal with or mention legislation or propositions should A, focus more on the principles and concepts contained with the legislation. Don't rely on the bill number, right? You know, delegates aren't always knowledgeable of every bill going through the legislature, and I'm sure all of you know there are a lot. And so don't just like rely on the bill number only. Be sure to come at the principles, argue the principles, don't just argue the bill number. But if a bill number is referenced, be sure to put the specific date of the language being referenced in parentheses next to the bill number. This info can be found on the leginfo.ca.gov. That's just a site where all information pertaining to legislation that's currently being considered in the California State Legislature is held. And yeah, so here's a good little example, SB 283 42307, right? But yeah, moving on. So attributes of a good resolution. We kind of saw this earlier with the dog example. So it's short, concise, clear, thought out, and with that thoroughness, it addresses the issue in the whereases, and it solves the problem. The SSCCC doesn't have to do a lot of other thinking when a good resolution is passed. Like, they can do what it says, implement it, and there's really not any other legwork. And those are most successful at General Assembly. So let's take a look. So this is an actual resolution written by a student that a couple years or some years back. And I want you all to think, is this a good resolution, or is this not so good? So let's read through it. So whereas the 1960 Donahue Higher Education Act envisioned free California higher education, however, the California community college students today face skyrocketing educational costs, and whereas the high cost of education is a threat to a diverse, just, and vibrant California community college system, student debt in the United States has now reached $1.3 trillion, and 40 million people now have student debt. And whereas many California community college students will transfer into the four-year university system and face much higher tuition than at the time the Donahue Act was adopted, as well as potential student loan debt. And whereas a National Day of Action was organized on November 12, 2015, the Million Student March, which is based around the following three core demands: free higher education for public colleges, the abolition of student debt, and a $15 an hour minimum wage for all students and workers on campus. Resolved, that the Student Senate for California Community Colleges commend the Million Student March and its three core demands, and that the Student Senate for California Community Colleges pledges to participate in the future national student demonstrations. So, after reading that, we'll start with the people in the room, but we also have people on Zoom. You can chime in as well. Are you on the Zoom, Paul? Oh, no, I was just curious. Roy can facilitate that. But based on what we've talked about so far, what makes this resolution look either good or bad? And I'll just take any hands going up. Don't be shy, but take a minute to analyze it, and then we'll come back. Richard.
That's it's good because there's four whereas statements.
Exactly. So, yeah, and with those whereases, they go over what they're trying to address. They're talking about the issue, right? They're being clear. They're not running on. Sure, some of the whereases may be a little long, but sometimes length is necessary. I know we really extremely emphasize conciseness and just being short and sweet, but nonetheless, if you need to explain something, explain it, right? Just do it in a timely manner, right? So exactly, it's there, it's short, they have the four whereases. And one thing I want to emphasize, just with that statement, not every resolution has to have four whereases. That's just the maximum amount, as well as with the resolved. Four is the maximum amount, but you can have less than that. But what else? What else are we thinking? What else in the chat? I could escape from, yeah, I'll just do that real quick and see what people are thinking here. Right. Okay. So nothing else in the chat. Is there anything else in the room that makes this, that people think this resolution should be either good or bad? What are people thinking? Yeah, Nikki.
I like that they cite resources.
Exactly. Right. They have the information ready for whoever is reading it to access it and see what they're talking about. Because as we all know, in the digital age, sometimes information isn't always just information. It could be misinformation, disinformation. So we got to have what we're advocating for readily available to our reader. But so some things that I think about when I'm reading this resolution is, like we've talked about before, it's clear, it's concise where it is and where it needs to be, but it also explains where, goes into depth where it needs to. But one thing that we haven't discussed yet is look at the resolves. Oops, let's go back. Look at the resolves. There's only two, which definitely makes it easier for the SSCCC to act on, right? And they're not outlandish. Like, the SSCCC can do these. These are feasible things they can do. Commend the Million Student March and its 3 core demands. We can do that. We don't need to set aside funds for that. We don't need to change our policy directives, right, to just complete that, which we wouldn't do. I want to emphasize, we would not change our bylaws just to meet the demands of a resolution, but or at least our purview, not our bylaws. We could indeed, if a resolution proposes to change our bylaws. But and then the second one, that the Student Senate for California Community Colleges pledges to participate in future national student demonstrations. Now this one, we could think this may be a little bit difficult in the future, and it's somewhat vague, but nonetheless, the SSCCC still does that. We have our March on March events, we have our Advocacy in April events, so those are instances of student demonstrations, student interaction with legislators that we can do. So these resolves are not like totally crazy, like they're not like asking the SSCCC to like go to war with Seesaw, right? But yeah, they're feasible. So all right, so we've looked at that one, and we've kind of just got a general consensus that this is a good one, and it actually passed and became a legislative, or not a legislative priority, just something that the SSCCC enacted. So let's move on, look at another one. Now, just from first appearances, we can see this is a little bit lengthy, but I'll go through it really quickly. So first, whereas, in the United States of America, tobacco use is responsible for about 1 in 5 deaths annually, i.e. about 443,000 deaths per year, and an estimated 49,000 of these tobacco-related deaths are the result of secondhand smoke exposure. And whereas the EPA has designated secondhand smoke to be a Group C carcinogen, where there is sufficient evidence that the substance causes cancer in humans, and the Surgeon General has established that there is no safe level of secondhand smoke exposure to people with and without medical conditions such as asthma, allergies, and other chronic illnesses experience worsening health outcomes as a result of smoke exposure. Whereas tobacco smoke outside of campus buildings can be drawn in through ventilation intakes and or open doors and windows, and students, staff, faculty, and guests should be able to walk through campus and enter their respective buildings free of exposure to tobacco smoke. To date, 1,577 colleges and universities in the United States alone have become tobacco or smoke-free campuses, and 100% of smoke-free campuses policies have been shown to be an effective intervention in reducing tobacco use among college students. Smoking remnants litter campuses, litter campus building entrances, and increases the amount of time, labor, and cost spent cleaning. And whereas the tobacco-free policy also applies to the use of e-cigarettes and other aerosolized nicotine or tobacco products, also known as electronic nicotine delivery systems or ENDS, in quote, in extensive, the American Lung Association called on the Obama administration to finalize this regulation so that all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, can be subjected to basic FDA oversight, end quote. That's only the whereases. Resolved that the Student Senate of the California Community Colleges, hereinafter referred to as SSCCC, endorsed that all California community colleges to explore adopting smoking areas with minimal student body foot traffic or smoke and tobacco-free policies for all its campuses. Tobacco-free is defined as the use of cigarettes, pipes, cigars, smokeless tobacco, snus, and other tobacco products. Resolved that this tobacco-free policy also applies to the use of e-cigarettes and other aerosolized nicotine or tobacco products. Resolved that SSCCC advocates that smoking cessation programs be widely available to students, staff, and faculty. The issue of implementation and enforcement should be addressed at the local community college level with respect and concern for student financial well-being. And finally, resolved that all students, faculty, and staff share in the responsibility for adhering to and making this policy successful. Right? So that was pretty hefty. But what is the crowd thinking? What are people online thinking? Paul?
Yeah, so we have some comments. So first and foremost, Matthew from Santa Rosa Junior College says he couldn't read it, so it's probably a bit blurry. But there was some other comments. Matthew from Riverside City College, it's a long one. Matthew from Santa Rosa, probably too long, right?
Right.
Anna from Irvine Valley College, there's so much going on.
Right, exactly.
And then Anna, prophecy, imagine.
Yeah. So the general consensus in the chat is like, holy cow, this thing is long. And they're absolutely correct. I mean, look at this. I'm not going to point to it because I'll move away from the mic. But look at the third whereas. That's a 5-line paragraph. This is on the brink of being an essay you would turn in your English 1A class. And it doesn't end there. Resolved 4. But, okay, so we have that it's long. What else are we thinking? People in the room, what other parts of this kind of either make it hot or not? Don't be shy, gang. Right here.
Looks like the first two resolves can easily be combined.
Exactly.
With defining what exactly they determine to be tobacco-free.
Exactly. Right, absolutely. So for all those in the Zoom, so tell me your name again. You're from Cyprus, right?
Yes.
Yes. Jaden? Jay, awesome. So Jay from Cyprus College, he said the first two resolves could easily be combined. And he's absolutely correct. There is no reason that those need to be two separate resolves. They literally ask very similar things, but also he also said that they're kind of vague. They are vague. I mean, going through the first resolved again, other tobacco products, like how are we going to set the definitions of that? The SSCCC, we aren't like the FDA. We don't set regulations for different just consumer products related to food or drugs, right? Which I guess nicotine technically is a drug. That's why the FDA has oversight over it. But right, that's not what we do. I mean, we can definitely advocate and endorse, like he was saying, that all California community colleges to explore, but I mean, what kind of stance is that? We endorse all of our colleges considering, right? That's not firm, that's not clear, and it's ultimately confusing. Other our California community colleges are just going to see that and they're going to be like, what do we do from here? Right, exactly. Thank you, Jay. So what else? What else are we thinking? Paul?
To echo those words, Brian Gooden from Long Beach City College. It's lengthy, but it does have some facts that will shorten it, so I'd say it's not very good due to the length. And also
Right, exactly. So we had Maddie from SRJC say it could be shorter, but we also had Matthew from LBCC, you said? Oh, Brian from LBCC. My mistake, Brian. He said there is facts. He's absolutely right. We should not just totally toss this thing aside, even though it does have a lot of errors. The facts in here are true. They're all completely clear. Okay. Um, we're just going to disregard that. But we can't just disregard this information. It's true. And it applies. It's been tested and verified by the FDA, the foremost organization in the United States federal bureaucracy that oversees just federal or just food and drug. But Paul, do we have another thing? It's not. Okay. Right. Okay, no, yeah, it's all good. So we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but for the people in person, do we see anything else from this resolution that may think it's not good, it's good, or let's go back and look at the attributes of a good resolution. So, one thing that, and just touching on what Brian from LBCC said earlier, it's thought out. It does. It is definitely like researched. It's definitely thought out. But solve the problem. I mean, it definitely proposes solutions, but they're not within the SSCCC's purview, right? Like, how are we going to demand that all colleges have this applied to e-cigarettes and other aerosolized nicotine or tobacco products? And yeah, how are we going to? I mean, we can definitely advocate that. I don't want to say we can't, because we can as an organization, right? That's what we do. We advocate for things in the state legislature. But can we get maybe some sort of plan or just more general guidelines? And just moving on with what it wants us to advocate for, secession programs be widely available to students, staff, and faculty. Right, exactly. It's just looking more and more, it's not totally unfeasible, right? But it definitely has aspects of that. It's lofty, I guess we could say in a word, right? But for our AV people, have we got the Zoom up and going again? We're working on it. Okay. Well, does anybody else have anything else to say about this resolution? I know we're kind of like going over it more than we need to, but we definitely or maybe not more than we need to, because we always want to go over it. And we do want to make sure you guys have time to write resolutions, because we actually have some breakout rooms that you guys will be going to in person and online, just to help draft resolutions. So we do want to get to that and leave enough time for that. But, right. I'd hate to move on without the online people, but you know what? We might just do that. So, okay. For those of us in person, which one would we prefer and why? So I'll leave it open to you guys. Which looks better? Which do you think the GA would have a better time approving, and SSCCC would have implementing? I'll give you some time to analyze too, because it is somewhat small text. Right. Anybody? What are we thinking? So we definitely recognize with the first one that it was, oh wait, these are different ones. Okay. So let's read these ones actually, because these are different. So, let's just look, okay, so let's look at undocumented student success. So whereas the colleges or SSCCC embrace all students regardless of citizenship in support of their educational aspirations, whereas the colleges of SSCCC have the responsibility to protect and promote academic achievement among each of their students, and whereas the success of each of the community colleges in California depends on the students that are ready to learn, educators, on and on and on. But we don't have to get directly into the text, but let's just look. We can infer things from just looking at the one on the right, right? The resolves, for instance, they're pretty lengthy. So we want to remember that we need to be short and concise in our resolutions to make it easier for the SSCCC to implement and ultimately for the GA to like it more. Put it in simple terms, so they have a better time approving it. But and looking on the left, with the nutritional alternatives resolution, you know, it maybe the whereases are a little long, and maybe that's just due to format, right? But ultimately, they're rather short, and you know, they don't ask for too much, and they cite everything. They cite like credible information, and the resolves, while also long, they're feasible. So let's look at the last one. Resolve that the Student Senate for California Community Colleges form a task force to work with college administrations and ASOs to have affordable food alternatives for students with dietary restrictions. So we can do that. SSCCC in the past has formed task forces, due to resolutions that have been passed to address a certain issue. So we can do that. Now let's look at the first one, that all the associated student governments in California community colleges should require administration to amend dining areas food alternatives to include dietary meals that are inclusive to the needs of students. So that one, a little bit iffy, right? How are we gonna require all ASGs in California at our California community colleges to require the administration to amend the dining area food alternatives, right? I mean, that's gonna be hard, put it simply. And that's not really something we can do. We can take a stance. We could say, as the SSCCC, we believe in order to accommodate all the dietary needs of our students, that ASGs should require their administrations to amend the dining areas. But that's only our stance. We don't have the power to go in, knocking on Cypress Community College saying, hey, you guys gotta change what you're feeding and you gotta make it accessible for all students of dietary needs, right? We can't do that. We are not like a secret police or anything. But, right. So ultimately, if we had to choose which one to prefer, while the one on the left does have two resolves and they're somewhat succinct, it's kind of lofty. And the one on the right, it's long. It has certain things that may be hard for us to address, but let's look at the resolves. So the resolve that the SSCCC encourages the Board of Governors of California, we're starting off great, encouraging, not acting, to embrace and formally support AB Bill 1366, mentions a bill, specific bill, that obviously has principles guiding to it, and it will probably go into the principles more in which it exactly does, and allow the creation of dream resource centers that would provide support services, including state financial aid, academic counseling, etc. So bingo, that looks good. Second resolve, that the SSCCC encourages, again, we like, the Chancellor of the California Community Colleges and the President or Chancellor of each community college in California to incorporate support for undocumented student success into their annual institutional plans. We like again. And resolve, the SSCCC invites students, teachers, educators, and support staff to assist in the dissemination of information and resources that aids undocumented students in attaining the financial security and legal immigration status essential for academic success. Last resolved, yes, we can do. It's just a little vague, but it's nothing that we can't accomplish, right? So I know I've only gone over them briefly, but is there anybody in person who would say left or right? Ramon? No? Okay. My bad. We thinking left, Nikki? Yeah, it is small text, and we apologize for that. But
I do like the last one, but it is a little longer.
right, exactly. So ultimately, we could call it a draw almost in some sense, but nonetheless, this slide gives us a good overview of both the good and bad attributes of actual resolutions, right? So let's move on. Also, have we gotten the Zoom people back on yet, or no? Okay. Okay, cool. Well, that's good. So now let's write an effective resolution. So I see you all have pen and paper, and if you don't, that's completely all right. But we're gonna try and write some resolutions. So we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people in here. So we could break up into 2 groups of 6, and let's try and write a resolution. So we have our whereases, we have our resolves, we have our basic structure that we've gone over, and Paul and I will be going to each group, just helping to facilitate and answer questions. But before we go into this, you could choose any topic you like when we break out into the groups. But we also, if obviously don't want to put you on the spot right away, we do have some mock topics. So for one, we talked about this yesterday in one of our one of our workshops. Why should professors prioritize OER and ZTC resources for students? That one's more based with actual things that are going on, right? We're good, Malinali? Okay, good. So apparently we've got the Zoom people back on, so that's great. So sorry for people in person, but just to reiterate for those online, we will be going into breakout rooms soon just to help write effective resolutions. And right now, we are going over some mock topics you can use. So obviously, we just went over the first one. But secondly, why should you change your car's oil, right? This one's easy. I mean, hopefully for most of us. Maybe if you have a hybrid or electric car, you don't have to think about this too much. But right, so this one's simple. It's funny. We can get the basic structures of a resolution through this. Why should the time out of high school and the GPA requirement be eliminated as Cal Grant qualifications? So this is actually related directly to AB 1456, and it's more related to actual student needs right now. But finally, another easy one, why should you wash your clothes? It's a great question, right? But let's see if the SSCCC can take a stance on that exact question. So just going through who we have in here, let's have both kind of like this section of the room, and from Ramon, not Fizza, from this side, go over and kind of conglomerate in this section, and then we'll have everybody else stick over here, and we can all just group around a table and go over different topics to write.
Can you show your whereas again?
Yes.
So nobody can see it.
Exactly. So I'll leave this up also, and I can alternate back and forth just so people can see the mock topics. But this is the basic structure we can follow. So, right, let's go into groups. Alrighty, everybody. So I hope you had fun in that. I know I had fun talking with Matt and Ramon about a specific resolution. But sorry to interrupt. But right now, what I'd like to entertain is that the people who are helping draft resolutions, maybe the actual writers, come up here and just talk about what your resolution says, what initiative you wrapped it around. I know Ayla, I think you were the drafter of your group's resolution, and it's completely fine if you're not finished. Just come up and present on, like, only if you'd like, though. I'd be happy to do it for you if you want. Awesome, yeah.
As long as I don't have to see far, I'm good.
No, yeah, you're completely fine, and you don't have to have anything finished or anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm a little short. I'll try to see over this. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, we were drafting a resolution for the subject pertaining to the Cal Grant. We were kind of splitting it up into different sections, so it's not like we had it figured out in its entirety. Some of us were working on the whereas statements while some of us were working on the resolution, so let's see if they actually fit together. So we have, whereas financial aid is crucial for the success of community college students. Whereas the GPA requirement as a qualification for Cal Grant, whereas the GPA requirement as a qualification for Cal Grant B. Sorry, I'm trying to read your writing, Richard. You're all good. Whereas the time gap requirement for high school students is set by the state, financial aid creates, what's this? I'm gonna skip past that one for a moment. I'm having a little trouble reading that.
Fine.
Okay, so our resolution was, let's see, resolved the Student Senate for California Community Colleges to advocate for the Student Aid Commission, the Board of Governors, and the Chancellor's Office to eliminate the 2.0 GPA requirement specific to Cal Grant B, as well as the qualification for the lack of a time gap following high school.
Right. Just the gap between high school.
Yeah, to be
Exactly.
eliminated as
Right.
well. That was the gist.
Awesome. Thank you, Ayla. Let's give a hand. Yeah. No, but that was great, right? Simple whereases, simple resolve. We can clearly see what they're asking for. They're referring to a bill. Great resolution. Thank you, Ayla. Like, I know I put you on the spot, but that was amazing. And just hats off to that group over there as well. That's just a great, yeah, just absolutely. But Ramon, would you like to come share what we were talking about? We kind of took the more sillier example of why you should wash your clothes, but I think you guys will like it.
Okay. Excuse my fuzzy jacket. It's cold.
Step up a little closer to the mic. Yeah. There you go.
All right. So for our title, we had Clothing Cleanliness Initiative. Whereas the distraction for students caused by the smell of the unwashed clothes hinders education and student success. Whereas the effects caused by the unwashed clothes not only affects the student's health, but the surrounding students as well. Resolved that the SSCCC establish a task force for researching and advocating for washing clothes. Resolved that the SSCCC establish an official stance that washing clothes is beneficial to your health and the academic success of the student.
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah. So common theme between both these, and hats off to Ramon too. Thank you for coming up to present. That's awesome. Yeah. So short, right? Concise. Clearly, obviously, we don't need to cite information about why washing your clothes is beneficial, because hopefully for most of us that's common knowledge. But right. But what we asked for is also things that the SSCCC can do. We can create a task force. Sure, what our idea behind it might be a little vague, but nonetheless, we can still do that. What the SSCCC can like decipher, okay, we can create that task force. We may alter its objectives a little bit, but nonetheless, we still have them provided by the resolution. And then we can take an official stance. That's one of the easiest things you can ask the SSCCC to do, because all we have to do is write a document saying official SSCCC stance, throw it out to the press, and bang, it's done. So yeah, perfect resolutions. I'm very happy to see that you guys were able to engage in in-person ones. But Malinali, would you like to share what our folks online were thinking? Yeah, you can come up and just talk about it, right?
Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so as far as the chat goes, or as far as the groups on Zoom, we took a little more serious approach, and we decided to work on an example that was happening at one of the community colleges right now. And so the title would be Students on the Faculty Hiring Committee as a resolution. So, and this is a working resolution. So one of the whereases would be, whereas students should be able to have a voice within this committee because students will be affected by these decisions. Whereas students can broaden the diversity within faculty to feel greater representation in the classroom. Whereas students are the direct recipients of faculty services, it would be beneficial to provide students with a voice in hiring decisions to ensure colleges are prioritizing student success. And then we got into the discussion on like different campuses, what their process is, or the process as far as like what committees they serve for the hiring committees at different campuses. And it seemed that there's a mix all throughout the different campuses. But one of the things that we came to an agreement is that we all need to like work together to be able to make sure that we support one another, especially when we're trying to advocate for ourselves, and to keep in mind that students are represented when students are able to sit in those seats. And so I think one of the final result, And this is an example that was used by one of the campuses. Be it resolved that by student government assembly and then the campus must approve the full and permanent participation of student on all faculty hiring committees. It is understood that should should a student not be available or fail to meet the committee responsibilities, the work of the selection committee should continue without student representation. And Roy, would you like to add anything else?
We wouldn't be able to hear him.
Okay.
Yeah, in person.
But I can.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you want to say what he's saying. He's just listening to what Roy's saying, another participant in the Zoom.
Okay. So another thing that we're working on is the language to be a little bit more concise, and that we know that there's some kind of guidelines for students to be sitting in hiring committees. So we're looking into that. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Molyneux. Let's give a hand for the people online. Yeah. Great job for people online interacting online as well. I know that can be super hard sometimes, but I really like about that resolution is how it manifested from a particular campus, right? Because ultimately, while these are statewide things that the SSCCC wants to resolve, nonetheless, if they come from a campus, they can be recognized as issues that are happening on other campuses as well. So I really like that, and I really like how you guys like acknowledge like how important being succinct is, and really trying to strive towards that in writing your resolutions. But yeah, so I'm very happy you guys all participated in that breakout session. You guys were able to converse with each other, not be super hesitant, and actually got some the groundwork for some actual resolutions, hopefully. Maybe not the wash your clothes one, because that was pretty simple and we knew about that, right? But nonetheless, great practice writing. But yeah, so just moving on with our presentation, obviously. So just some things we probably should have touched on earlier, and that's my mistake. But it just must be proper form, right? Semicolons after each statement for resolves, and then or not after each one, only after the last resolve, and then must have the appropriate signatures. So resolutions can also get endorsed by specific ASGs or by specific ASGs or certain caucuses within the SSCCC, or you could get them approved by regions as well. But they don't have to sign them. You can just put like sponsored by, etc. Right? It must be legible. Obviously, most of them don't get submitted written. They can though, but I would advise you to submit them electronically. It's a little bit easier. And must be submitted on time, and that leads me perfectly into our next line. So this is our 2021 resolutions timeline that we developed within the resolutions committee. So the original resolution submission deadlines for all those looking to actually submit a resolution for this year's GA, submit it by February 4th, right? And then we will take all those resolutions that are given to us. We'll make a packet for it, so all the delegates can review them before they go into voting in GA. And we will disseminate that 5 days after. So the first resolution package will 50 days prior to GA. That'll be on February 9th. And then the amendments. You can submit amendments if you think certain things you want to change about your resolution, right? Or if you've been advised by maybe certain committees, like the resolutions committee, like, hey, maybe strike this out because this isn't something that SSCCC can do. Send it back to you. But the amendments to your resolution, the deadline for that is February 24th. And then after we get all those amended resolutions, we will make a separate packet from the original resolution package, brain fart, and that will be our final date within the resolutions timeline, and that packet will be disseminated on March 2nd, and then we will vote on these at GA, which will be April 1st through 3rd. But yeah, are there any questions? Actually, we'll entertain questions at the end, my mistake. So now questions. Are there any questions from those either online or in person about the resolutions process timeline or any other things about the structure of a resolution? I'd be happy to answer them, or our co-presenters would as well. But yeah, Malinali, is there anything in the chat? No? Okay, cool. Just be sure to tell me if there is. But is there anything from those in person? Alrighty. Well, that means we must have done a pretty good job, presenters. Right. Oh, Malinali, there's a question?
Can we just confirm that those resolution dates are for 2022 and not 2021?
Oh my goodness. Yes, thank you, whoever. Oh my gosh, that's my mistake, gang. Yes, those are for 2022, because obviously the years change on December 31st into January. But yes, those are 2022. My mistake. Yeah. Sorry for those who took a picture. They are 2022, but the gist is February. Remember the months, but yes, for 2022 process. Thank you for correcting me, whoever put that in the chat. Are there any other questions from either online, Paul? Yes, the month and days are accurate, and but the year obviously not. My mistake. And if anything else is amended to this, I will be sure to inform everybody. Send out a different one. Yeah, but I apologize for that. Are there any other questions regarding anything else? Alrighty. Well, we ended right on time, everybody. I want to thank you all for attending. This was a super great workshop. Got to work with a lot of different people, and you guys got to work with other members who are attending. So yeah, great job. And just give yourself a hand. Yeah.